Hello and welcome. Welcome to Innovations in Education and welcome to Hirsch Academy. My name is Shelley Carnes and I am one of the founders of Hirsch as well as the head of school here. So today you're in for a treat. We've gathered our staff together to answer the questions that you've sent in. And at the end, we're going to share some takeaways that we've discovered, and probably you have too, as we've all been thrown into this new virtual learning format with our students. But first, let me tell you a little bit about our school. We're at the end of our 15th year. We started back in 2004, and throughout our journey, we've championed neurodivergent students ranging in ages 5 to 14 years old. So basically, we go up into the end of 8th grade. We have 30 students and about 16 full-time staff with added contractors and specialists in that mix. And our students have sensory, motor, and communication differences. And boy, have they raised the bar in how we support their education, as well as how we support their sensory needs, their bodies, and especially communication access. Our school has been influenced by a wide range of innovative thinkers from the very beginning of Hirsch. We've had mentors from the floor time community who really emphasize the importance of relationships, connections, and diving deep and respecting individual differences. We've also had mentors that showed us the importance of creating opportunities that inspire wonder and curiosity and creativity. And those belief systems have stuck with us and helped shape who we are today. But there is one group who really shifted the way we think about our students, who taught us and inspired us to dig even deeper. They've influenced how we support our students' motor and sensory needs, how we support their communication access, how we support curriculum, and even their social emotional needs. Well, that group of people, the ones that taught us the most out of anyone, are the autistic self-advocate community. Those adolescents, young adults, our very own students who share similar sensory, motor, and communication differences as our students. So our school would not be Hirsch Academy without their partnership and their mentorship that they've given us throughout the years. So today, you'll get a brief window into all that we've learned. You'll learn how this community has inspired our belief systems, our teachings, our supports, and most of all, they've inspired our passion to do what's right for these students. So let's get started. So our first question comes from an educator from Texas, and she asks, what is presuming competence? I keep hearing about this phrase, and what would it look like in a classroom? So, Erin, would you like to tackle that question?
Hello, I'm Erin McAllister. I have the honor of being the communication specialist at the Hirsch Academy in Atlanta, Georgia, and the privilege of being the mother of Catherine McAllister, who spells to communicate. So today I want to talk about presuming competence. It is a phrase that you've no doubt probably heard about, but what is it really, and where did it come from? Well, it starts with the least dangerous assumption, which is an inclusive approach to educational policy and pedagogy. The least dangerous assumption states that in the absence of conclusive data, educational decisions should be based on assumptions which, if incorrect, will have the least dangerous effect on the student. The concept was coined by a special education researcher by the name of Anne Donnellan. The principle is most closely associated with communication disorders, but also can be applied to general teaching and learning. The principle holds that one should, in the absence of evidence to the contrary, presume competence, not non-competence. For me as an educator, Presuming competence is the philosophy that drives my behavior. It's an active strategy that I use every day, and it has a very significant impact on the opportunities that I offer my students. So I teach at grade level or above Shakespeare and other classic literature. I teach chess. I teach poetry analysis. I teach classical music composition and theory, to name a few. When I asked Catherine, my daughter, what does presuming competence mean to you? She spelled, to believe one universal overarching tenet. We are strong, competent individuals who can do anything that you can with the right people supporting us.
Thank you, Erin, and thank you, Catherine McAllister. Thanks for sharing your ideas on presuming competence. So let's get to our next question, and this is from an educator out in California. And he says, our students struggle significantly with their bodies. They throw things, they struggle with grasping small items. How does your staff navigate that? And how do you help your students build motor control? All right, who wants to address that?
So that's sort of the million-dollar question, isn't it? How does an art teacher like me help build the skills for better motor control? So one of the important things about my job is to find art projects that are interesting. If it's not interesting to me, it won't be interesting to them. And the second is to find projects that they can be successful at and that can be broken down into just a few steps. I was feeling ambitious, and I thought we would do some sculptures in the style of Giacometti. The first step is breaking down the motor steps of building this specific sculpture. 2 is providing opportunities to practice these motor steps. And 3 is creating a Giacometti sculpture and building motor control at the same time. So let me show you what this looks like. I've pre-cut strips of foil. And this next part was a challenge because they had to learn 3 movements. It was a pinch, twist, and a wrap. So what you have to do, you have to pinch it here, twist it, and then wrap it around, pinch, twist, wrap, and a pinch, twist, and a wrap. So the last few steps were to staple the figure onto a cardboard base and paint it. And this is what we came up with.
Like Jerry, as the play specialist, I'm constantly going through my own process of building a foundation and then adding in layers of purposeful and intentional movement in a joyful and fun way. And I work through this process based on my understanding of what the brain-body disconnect is and isn't at the foundation. I know that it does not mean incompetence, but it does mean that any student can be successful with the appropriate supports. One strategy I use, knowing that our students need more motor support and practice building motor control, is I take games and transform them from a 2-dimensional structure into a 3-dimensional full body activity. Let's take Monopoly, or Hirschopoly, for instance, which is a multi-layered game. Before diving right into gameplay, I'm going to break it down and provide opportunities for the students to develop skills before bringing it all back together. In the first layer of this breakdown, I'm going to focus on the cognitive components. So I'm going to teach the students the rules, the principles, and practices of the game. And then I'm going to create activities that allow them to practice skills of budgeting, problem solving, and critical thinking. Next, I'm going to identify the key motor pieces. And I'm going to create games that specifically target those motions and allow for skill development. The two motor pieces for this game specifically are rolling a dice and manipulating a playing piece. Let's take the manipulation of a playing piece, for example. For this motor component, I might create a grid and give students coordinates to place their piece in. This allows the opportunity for them to practice skills of scanning, extending the arm, and placing their piece on the playing structure. At this point in the process, I'm going to bring the layers, cognitive and motor, together, and the students will begin to play the game on this vertical two-dimensional playing structure. Once the students have become familiar with the process of playing on the 2D game structure, then we transition it to the gym, where the students' bodies act as the playing pieces and full body movement is incorporated to determine how the students will travel around the life-size board. Thus, combining all previous layers, but now incorporating full body movement. Overall, I'm constantly trying to conceptualize how to transform games and break them down in a way that best supports the motor needs of our students. And I do this in 3 ways. 1, by breaking down each game into manageable steps. 2, by providing opportunities to practice and develop skills in novel contexts. And 3, by bringing it all back together into a cohesive whole.
So, just as Whitney has broken down the process, each pose in yoga can be broken down as well. But it's not just about the pose. Everything from session structure, the props we use, to the lighting, sounds, and layout of the room intentionally goes towards supporting motor control and strengthening a mind-body connection. Each posture can be broken down or modified to cater the individual. Keeping in mind that everybody's body is different and that this difference can vary on any given day, it is good to be able to gauge whether extra support may or may not be necessary at each moment. This comes with building relationships and connection, but a good rule of thumb to remember can be drop your expectation of what a pose should look like and allow the individual's body to achieve a given pose to whatever degree is available to them in the moment. This does not mean to jump towards simplifying the pose right off the bat, however. It can be good to start with less support, adding in supports as needed.
Bow your head. Bow that head. Namaste. Good job.
For instance, if downward dog were the posture that we are trying to achieve, we would start on hands and knees, tabletop position, and work to lift the knees off the ground, straightening the legs to raise the hips up towards the sky. If the knees are not lifting off the ground, despite verbal prompt or touch support, such as tapping on the knees to indicate this is where we lift, or using a strap or your hands on the hips to help physically lift, then the pose can easily be modified by using a chair to raise the floor up to a more accessible height. Having the student restart the pose by standing with their back on the wall for a body support and moving a chair out in front of them with the seat facing inward. They then reach up and lean forward to bring their hands to the seat of the chair, giving the same shape and feel of downward dog, just with an added support.
Thanks for the great breakdown yoga poses, Krista. Well, I'm Coach Chris, and I'm here to show y'all how I use the small details to get to the big picture. Now, how I practice motor control is I take a desired motor task and I break that motor task into micro movements. Micro movements are simple movements that normally use one or two joints, or is a stationary hold. Now I practice each micro movement till it has been mastered or practiced enough, and then I start with the base movement and add the micro movements together from the base movement. The base movement in normal desired motor tasks starts with the legs and works its way up, like building a building. For a quick practice breakdown, we can look at shooting a basketball. 1. Standing in place, the base movement. 2. Squatting. 3. Holding the basketball. And 4. A shoulder press to shoot the ball. Now, another way I like to help guide my students through movement is with prompts. And there's 7 different types of prompts I like to use. Body gesture prompts, or just gestural prompts, are prompts used to indicate to the students how to move without touching them, just by using body gestures. Seen here, I do body gestures, and the student learns how to respond to those gestures appropriately. Visual prompts help indicate to the students where you want their body or a part of their body to go to complete the movement or exercise. The student here has dots to indicate where to put his hands and feet. Also, the arrows on the floor help indicate where to run to. An example-led prompt is when I demonstrate what the movement will look like so that the student knows exactly what to do, or what their body should look like throughout the movement. So I pass the ball to her and she repeats the movement. Plus a bonus visual prompt, the arrow in front of her so she knows where to bounce the ball. Verbal prompts are when I use my voice or sound effects to signal what to do, or just give basic instruction. All right, Lily, what's the first step? Perfect, that's the first step. Second step. A little bit more. Nice. And the third step? Rhythmic verbal prompts use rhythm with your verbal prompts to help get the exercise going and moving smoothly, like counting or saying up and down to a beat. 1, duck, dodge, 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 dodge. 2, dodge. 3, dodge. 4, dodge. 5. Oh, yeah. Physical prompts is physically tapping or touching the muscle, limb, or area that is meant to activate to achieve the movement.
Yes, Lily.
Hand over hand is a version of physical prompting, but when you physically help achieve the desired movement by moving the body itself. My final component is support. And there's a few different types of support I like to think about when I try to help my students through movement. So one of the first things I think about is external and environmental support. This is the lighting in the room, how clean the area is, the noise level around us, and making sure all distractions and things like that are out of the way. But one of the most important things I think about is my voice. This is how I communicate with the children and make sure the session goes great. The voice tone that I use and the facial expressions I make is key to a great session. So another thing I like to think about is internal and emotional needs. Internal needs is like need a bathroom break, water break, hunger, things like that. Or emotional needs, like if they're happy, sad, angry, upset, flustered. And now paying attention to my students' emotional needs is key to success in the gym and makes for a great session as long as everyone's happy and on the same page. So the final component that I think about when helping support anyone, especially my students, is physical support. This is the big one because it is important for me to be aware of my students' physical abilities or what they're capable of. Now, these are things like flexibility, balance, cardiovascular endurance, muscular strength, muscular endurance, and coordination. Thinking about these things is important to the session and for anyone to help anyone move or exercise.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you to the entire movement and specialist team. That was excellent. So let's get to the next question. This is from an educator in Rhode Island, and she asks, do you have a philosophy that you work under when designing curriculum? All right, who wants to tackle that one?
I'll take that one.
Go ahead, Jill.
And I'm Jill Brownlee. I am the science teacher at the Hirsch Academy. And yeah, we do use a philosophy when thinking about our classrooms and what we're teaching. I think generally we would describe it as UDL, Universal Design of Learning. But when we think about our philosophy, you know, one of the reasons I love working at Hirsch is because we are really encouraged to think differently and outside of the box. We're pushed to think of it as an evolving process in deciding on a philosophy. And we're always going back to the cornerstone of presuming competence, of course. You know, when I went to college for this, we were taught all these different philosophies of education, and I thought I had to choose one. So I had to be a constructivist or behavioralist or whatever that might be. And I didn't realize that you can make it your own. You can pull from different philosophies, you can tweak them, you can create your own. And that's what we do at Hirsch, and I think that's what makes Hirsch so unique. And the other important thing, I think, is that we're really open to shifting our ideas and changing them. So we're really not locked into one way of doing anything ever. And if you've been to Hirsch, you would definitely know that's true about us. We're not one size fits all. So we're all about like creating what's feeling good in our classrooms. We're listening to our students. We're guided by the self-advocates, and we're going to do what feels right for all of those things in our classroom. And very similarly, we think about curriculum that same way, right? So ever evolving. We don't have a standard that we go by for curriculum. Well, we follow some standards, but we don't have like a teacher's guide. So we're creating our curriculum, we're writing curriculum, we're open to modify and change our curriculum as our students might suggest, based on their interest, based on our interest. So we're really guided by them. And, you know, we're knowledgeable about how curriculum should build throughout their educational journeys. So we have some resources that I would say are go-to for planning our curriculums. I can actually include those in our presentation too. I can give those to you guys. A few things that we always use, some books, podcasts, websites, videos, YouTube channels, but we're always thinking about that UDL piece. And you should catch Susan's talk, because I know she's going to talk about that a lot on June 7th. I think that's when she's presenting. So yeah, I hope that answers that question.
That's great. Yes, we will have resources at the end of this for all of you. All right, here's the next question. So this question is from a public school educator here in Georgia. And she says, I have a classroom of students who have very different learning styles and communication differences. For example, one uses an iPad, one is just learning the letter boards. How do I even begin to support them? Who wants to talk
on that one? I'd love to jump in on that one, Shelley. Hi, I'm Alex Habib, and I'm also a lead teacher here at Hirsch. And I have been an early child educator for over 20 years. So I've had a wide, broad range of students and learners in other private schools, in public school, and here at Hirsch. So I'd love to talk about that. So I have three kind of guiding forces when I'm meeting a new family. And I say family because that is part of our philosophy of accepting a student's entire family, because we want such a holistic approach like Jill talked about, and not that one size fits all. So we accept our families. And then I think about three main things. I think about building that relationship, which you're going to hear us all talk about. And we all know that students need to feel that they are respected and trusted by their teachers and by their therapists. But that's where we start. We start with building that trust, with our students and their families. And once we've got that trust, we want a partnership, right? We're going to partner with our students because, like Jill mentioned, we talk to the true experts, the self-advocates, but we really come from a place where we believe our own students, our own selves are the experts about themselves, even our littlest ones. And we want to help guide them on that path of self-discovery. So we're going to partner with them, and then the real collaboration and learning begins. But what does that look like? Like, you walk into your classroom on a Monday, and what do you actually do, right? So the first thing we always do, and the way we build those three things, is planning for their sensory needs and their emotional needs. We know our students have sensory and motor differences, right? So we have to create an environment that works for them as individuals and within the context of their group. So you walk into a Hirsch classroom, we often think less is more. There's not going to be a bunch of big posters and ABCs and charts all around our classrooms. We're going to try to bring down that sensory load for our students. You're going to see tons of different seating options, bouncy chairs, pacing paths, not seating, right? And rockers, you name it. You'll see flappers, chewies, any sensory support you can think of or they can think of, we will try to provide, within reason, in our classroom. So we start there. And then what do? Well, we partner with them, we start to collaborate, and we think, how can I access what this child knows and what they want to know? It's about tools and access. So we start there with that overriding belief that they can learn and want to learn, and we have to figure out how to access what they're thinking and feeling and what tools they need to be successful there. And then, if we feel like it's not working, we're going to talk to that student's team. We're going to talk to that student. We're going to talk to their parents, their other therapists, their former teachers. And then we might even pull in a self-advocate that's on our visionary board or in our community who may have had a similar profile to that child, and may have some ideas on how to continue to support that child and that family. And I think Jill touched on this, but we are all humble enough and self-aware enough to modify and adjust our expectations. But then if it's still not working, we switch. We are going to do what that kid needs and what that class or that group needs in the moment, and then move from there. Because those tools and that access and that demonstration, like all of us, ebbs and flows throughout a day. So we're always just attuned in the moment and thinking out for our students, and really partnering and collaborating with them and building from there. So I hope that kind of helps answer that question.
That's terrific, Alex. I know probably a couple of you also want to add on to that. Who wants to go next?
I would love to add to that. Hey everybody, my name is Leanne Trolino. I am the math teacher at Hirsch. So when I am kind of going over and trying to figure out how to access communication with our students and demonstrating the knowledge that Zavid was talking about, and how Alex said that we know that they want to learn, right? And that they are on top of it. So I use some form of AAC, or augmentative alternative communication. Specifically, I'm trained in how to use letter boards and spelling, but we know that there are students and other persons with motor differences who are not well versed in using the letter boards or any other type of AAC. So what do we do when we need to communicate with them? You can utilize the small whiteboards or dry erase boards to do choices. You can put choices on paper. You can use Post-it notes, anchor charts, index cards, pretty much anything that you can have two of, you can use for choices. We also like to do boogie boards, which are really great. I know Alex uses them a lot with her younger crew. We also utilize full body engagement. So for example, we'll have the answers posted in different areas of the room and encourage the students to be able to walk to those separate spaces. It might involve a little bit of prompting, but that's okay, as long as we still get to that area. Some other things that I would recommend utilizing to help with the demonstration of knowledge are slant boards. Stands are really awesome as well. Your standard worksheet, you can use them for handwriting, for highlighting, for circling, just any little motor task that you can think of to help indicate an answer. That goes a long way. Offering different types of supports for our kids that focus on the visual, the auditory, proprioceptive, these are going to increase and be so beneficial for your student, and it will allow them to feel so successful no matter what the outcome is, because they know that you believe in them. As Alex mentioned, we really like to focus on our self-advocates and our students. So what she was saying before about them kind of helping us find what works and what doesn't work, we really listen to that. So I kind of went over some more specific examples. I'm wondering if anybody has a kind of a better way to explain what this looks like in the classroom in regards to multiple points of entry.
Thanks, Lean. I'll take that one. So multiple points of entry is a hallmark of ADL, which Jill explained to you a little bit ago. But what that means, if you think about how we look at designs of buildings for variable needs and multiple points of access, we can do the exact same thing with our lessons and with our classrooms, exactly the same. Some great questions to think about when you're reflecting on points of entry for an intangible like a lesson, or for a real tangible like your classroom are, well, how do I set my classroom up in a way that has multiple points of access or multiple points of use? Things that consider the needs of all bodies and all minds. Well, do I have different and flexible seating options? We've already talked about that. Do I have areas in the room where kids can take breaks, or areas where they can pace or move their bodies? I know Alex mentioned that. Another question is, how do I intentionally plan instruction so that my lessons have multiple variables for learning styles? Well, have I considered a variety of methods for accessing the information? Have we used an auditory version, a kinesthetic, a visual? I know others have talked about that. How can I offer a multitude of visual supports? In particular, we seem to find a lot of kids who have really varying visual needs. Some are going to need something projected on a smartboard in really large font, and possibly with a different color. Those are things to consider. Others are going to need things printed so that they can access them up closer to their eyes. We even use our tables sometimes, which is, I know, a big taboo, but we write on them so kids can see it again in color and in whatever the size font the child needs to be able to deal with the information. The third part is, how can I give students structured choice and agency in the way that they demonstrate their knowledge? So for me, that's the very last piece. Have I considered multiple methods of response, which is really what I'm talking about? Have I thought about options for writing? Have I thought about options for circling answers? Have I thought about options for pointing or spelling, like Leanne has discussed? Have we considered voting with sticky notes, voting with note cards, voting with your body? All thumbs up, thumbs down board, which I use in my classroom all the time. All of these things to put into your mind are great ways to consider access and use for multiple points across your classroom and lessons.
All right, team. That was excellent. And as we're closing in on our Hirsch discussion here, there's one last question, because we can't not address this, right? We've all been thrown into this new virtual platform. And like it or not, we've learned some new things, right? We've learned some things that do work. So let's just go around and rapid fire kind of talk about what you've discovered in this new virtual platform with your students, and what would your takeaways be for our audience?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I think my biggest takeaway, I want to reiterate jump on what Susan said, her focus on multiple points of entry and how essential that is when creating and designing learning experiences. And that is whether or not it's virtual or on campus, but that's my big takeaway that I've learned from this experience recently.
Can I pipe in there, Erin? Just to piggyback on that a little bit, when you guys talk about those multiple points of entry, my biggest takeaway is having that available during those parent coaching times. Kind of knowing our students may or may not be at the same communication level, especially with AAC at home, that they are at school, and it's different. So really connect with those families, coach the parents, and set up opportunities for them to be successful in their communication at home, regardless of where they are in the process of learning AAC. And in thinking about that, also when our students at school, like Erin said, on campus or at home, say, I don't know, or walk away or get something wrong, we don't just stop there. We think, how else can I ask this question? How else can I support this child or this parent-child's team to go ahead and demonstrate what they just learned, instead of taking that I don't know or thinking when they walk away that was the end of that. So I would say to focus on those two as well.
Something that I've learned in the past few weeks of, teaching on a virtual platform is the importance, more so now than ever, of using the strategies of UDL that we've talked about in our presentation. So when I'm creating lessons, I'm making sure that I have a slideshow, maybe I'm linking in a video, a fun website, I'm highlighting words, I'm enlarging words, I might reduce some of the sensory input that's on a slide, but I'm thinking about all of those things and I'm doing them all to keep the lesson fun and engaging, and to make sure I'm meeting the needs of all of my students' learning channels. That's a big one for me.
I think you might be muted. See, this is one of our things that we've learned, right?
That's one of my biggest takeaways. No, I think to piggyback on Jill, speaking of engaging and fun, I think a big thing that I've learned in my role is that our students need to move, and they also really need to play. And I think we figured out ways to support movement and play through staff partnering with each other, while one guides the session, and then the other one's able to coach and facilitate the play and or movement. And I think this has been especially successful for our students.
Yay. I'll go next. So my takeaway is about novel information and structured choice. I'm convinced that when you take interesting information and pair it with the ability to have an opinion-based choice or option, then you give students a way to connect to a framework that links them both back to the information and to each other, which we all know is something that's a lot more challenging to do in a virtual world than it is in our classrooms. And if this is something that you'd like to know more about, I'd love for you to join me on Sunday the 7th to learn a little bit more about what this looks like in creating immersive curriculum. Love to see you there.
That is great. So I'm going to go off what Susan just said. My takeaway focuses on the integrity of connection. So it's really important for our students to feel connected with both us and their peers. At the beginning of all of our virtual classes, I can say that all of our teachers take the time to greet each and every one of our students, and we like to recognize something unique about them. So we will talk about maybe what they're eating for breakfast, or if a couple of their classmates are matching outfits. And we also really like to highlight their answers in the classes and compare when they agree with each other, or even if they disagree with each other. Just that connection is really important. We really need that sense of belonging, especially during this time. So it's important for us to make a connection a priority during the virtual experience.
So speaking of connection, the biggest takeaway for me has been support and working together as a team just to figure this situation out. So realizing that I'm not in this thing alone, and that I have a great team of support to lean on, but also recognizing where I can offer support for others as well. We're in this together.
Great. Everybody had some great takeaways, but I can mostly relate to what Krista and Leanne said. Leanne talking about the connection. We connect with kids every minute of the school day. And just to not have that, not for them not to have that, it's just amazing how much you miss it and how much they need it. And I really love the way our teachers invite specialists like myself into their classrooms so we can see these kids, you know. And with Krista, I agreed, you know, how was I going to teach art, you know, virtually? I could do drawing lessons, yes, but paint, what else can I do? But then Team Hirsch came to the rescue.
And that's the truth, right? I think more now than ever, we are all in this together. And I think all of us hope that all of you out there, that you reach out to us and you ask your questions and really, you know, connect with us so we can keep learning together, because it's a process and we need each other. So from all of us to all of you, we hope you and your families and your students are healthy and stay healthy and safe. And we hope you stay connected with us. Thanks for coming.